Hello and welcome to DDOCast episode 626, recorded the weekend of January 31st. I'm your host, Patrick. This week's screenshot, Natiri perches on a tall stump bathed in starlight in the 495th screenshot of the week. Really nice screenshot, well use of lighting, and I believe that's in the Feywild. We like to talk about Dungeons & Dragons online nearly every weekend. You can catch us through Twitch, YouTube, the DDO forums, iTunes, or from our website at DDOCast.com. DDOCast is hosted by Cyber Ears, the awesome podcast hosting network. Shows are usually available within a few days of recording. The next show will probably be next weekend, and you can stay updated by following us on our social media pages or our website, DDOCast.com, with our calendar. On the podcast this week, we're going to go back to a series we started several weeks ago. Actually several months ago, building a tank. Had a little trouble getting the scheduling to kind of work out with our guest from that Benton, and still wasn't actually able to do that. So we have a new guest this week, Epicsoul, to help us kind of just go through some ideas around building a tank and some advice and stuff like that. We'll start with game news. A couple weeks to get through this week, just because I didn't mention this before, but I had intended on doing a show next week or last weekend, but my power went out a few times, so that's why there was no show last week. It was a little difficult to do a show when you don't have any power. In any case, update 48.3.1 was released January 20th. Pretty short little hot fix. The Snow Peaks Festival. Snow Peaks coins have had their description updated to let people know where they can turn in the ingredients. That would be Flurry in the Hall of Heroes while the festival is active. Frozen keys purchased from the DDO store are now properly bound to account. That's why they were taken out of the store briefly. Snow Peaks Festival rewards are no longer available to trade with the Glamour Dust trader in the Hall of Heroes. They had actually pulled that trader out because of this issue. It's just to keep people from just grinding out any one that they want, any cosmetic that they want through the Glamour Dust Trader via this festival. Elixirs of Frosty Luck now continue to provide their benefit after a character death. That's important. We actually talked about that briefly last time. Some public areas will now snow when the Snow Peaks Festival is active. It's the same thing that we've seen with the Midwinter Festivals, along with the bug of snow falling where it's not supposed to when you go from one of those areas. A small problem. Spirits of the Rain no longer have a chance to appear as champions. That's to correct undesired behavior of farming Snow Peaks Festival chests, because you could get a lot of named champions there relatively quickly. That was that patch. World transfers. They were taken down, disabled for reasons of maintenance for a couple of days. They are back, but they were down for about a week, I think. That happened. The Fables of the Feywild soundtrack was released on YouTube. So if you'd like to listen to the Fables of the Feywild music, we actually had the composer Bill Champagne on the show a few weeks ago. But you can now get that all on YouTube and play it there. The Snow Peaks Festival has been extended through February 9th. That wasn't actually in relationship with the key thing. They took the keys out of the store, and because they did that, they wanted to extend the festival. So we have an extra week to do that. They do have plans to offer different challenges in Snow Peaks in the future, and they've thought already about what a more skill-based version of the slide might look like and what its reward structure might be. We'll see what ends up happening in the future, but the first-year version of Snow Peaks should be considered the easy, anyone-can-do-it version of the event, which I think they achieved. It is very easy, and anyone can do it. Neither the frozen keys nor the coins you acquire will expire and can be used in future versions of the event. If that will change in the future, they will let us know, but that is not the current. So there you go there. Bonus days through today. So by the time you actually hear this and this show goes out, it'll be over, but bonus was plus 10 Treasure Hunters boost through January 31st. These sales rise again 25% off of select reincarnation items, healing items, spell point potions, quest elixirs through February 4th. And the weekly coupon code is a Wand of Charm Person. The code is Wand Charm, also through February 4th. So you want to test that out because you really shouldn't buy that item from the store of all places. This will give you a chance to do that. It's kind of a really strange one to even have in the store in the first place, but there you go. Community news: the 410th Chronicle. This is the one from 2 weeks ago. We got a shout out for DDOCast kicking off our 7th season. That's the static group that I play with on Kyber. Most Wednesdays at 5:30 p.m. Pacific time. We didn't have a show last week because I was able to work and conflicted with that. So, but we should have one this week. The comment for the week: if your favorite character could be the star of a famous real life movie, what would it be? Not sure which movie, but it would definitely be a war movie because my favorite characters tend to be kind of tanky-ish. So probably go something along those lines. Probably not a water-based one since tank, heavy armor, swimming, not a great combination, even though my swim's actually not too bad. I mean, it's not a movie, but I'd like to say Band of Brothers just because I really like the show. And if you haven't seen Band of Brothers, go watch it. It's a great show. The fan site news. DDOCast got a shout out for episode 625. This is where we talked about the Snow Peaks Festival. You can kind of hear our review of that. Mickey chronicles rating every raid. You can read her latest blog post. DDO Stream is your first stop to find DDO on Twitch. This week, Brock and friends go undead. DDOPL gets responsible. Brighter Days Ahead fights Archons. On Twitch, Newbie Cobra builds a Death Cleric. Noel Day runs a Barbarian. And Warblewind shoots for 20. And on YouTube, Father and Son Gaming does some guides. Small Fox starts. And Corey Goodson fights. Some really short descriptions of those shows this week for that chronicle. Let's see. The 411th Chronicle, Community Spotlight, is to highlight the official soundtrack to Fables of the Feywild available on YouTube, so you can check that out. The comment, would you rather be one large character or 4 smaller characters that could move simultaneously? One larger character. I like bigger numbers, and it's a lot less complex, I think, to manage one character as opposed to 4 characters moving simultaneously. I will take the easy and big. Fansite news: Mickey chronicles her rating again. DDO Stream is the first stop to find DDO on Twitch. This week, Doug lives a bard's life. Brighter Days Ahead has fun in Shavrath, and DDOPL falls into a ring of fire. Also on Twitch, Brackart quests on Kenneth. Simeku Grogarian levels, and Sam Skrobo gets heroic. Over on YouTube, Scrimtom makes a bear druid. Axel goes over his means, gear, and stats, and Planky runs an alchemist bombardier. Also, in the Let's Talk shop, they're taking applications for a new round of Players Council. So you can find out more about that private preview program on the forums. The basic version of that information is they have a Players Council, which is a collection of players that the devs kind of bounce ideas off of. Get some feedback from. It's you usually are looking at things that are a ways out from actually being live, or even on Lemania. So it's a very early version of previewing. You do have to do an NDA. You're not allowed to share that information out in the public. And if you do this, please don't. It's not good for the game when that happens. But if you're interested in doing that and giving feedback, it's not just getting a peek at it. You are asked to give feedback, so be ready to do that. D&D Night on DDO Stream is Sundays at 7 p.m. on twitch.tv/DDO Stream. That's where we do D&D pen and paper virtual tabletop using Fantasy Grounds, the sponsor of the show. And you can catch me there some of the weeks. This weekend is a classic D&D night, and then next week we'll be back to our kind of regular 4-week rotation. It always gets a little interesting. We have a 5th week. The DDOCast news, again, DDOCast Plat will be back this week. Had a week off because of my work schedule. And we should be probably doing that pretty consistently for a little while, at least until baseball season maybe starts up. Should be doing that. And that will kind of wrap up the show for the news portion of the show this week. So stay tuned for Building a Tank Part 3 with our new guest, Epicsoul. Really excited to bring that to you. It'll be a 5-part series. It'll kind of be the next several shows. The one thing that's likely to kind of butt into that might be if we get the producer's letter. We were hoping to get that in January. That didn't happen. Coco Majobo, you said, I believe on this show, to hold you responsible if it doesn't happen, so we're going to do that. Get that producer's letter out. We'd like to talk about it, sir. But we're looking forward to that, so when that does come out, we'll be doing that. But until then, we'll be talking about building a tank for the next couple of weeks. So thanks for listening to the show. Thanks to Epic for joining me to talk about building a tank, and to all the contributors for DDOCast, and to Standing Stone Games and Wizards of the Coast for making DDO happen, and to Cyber for hosting the podcast. If you'd like to support the show, you can visit our website, DDOcast.com, or you can support us on Patreon. If you have a DDO-themed webpage or you Twitch DDO and you'd like to be featured on our website, you can email us at ddocast@gmail.com. You can also hit us up at ddocast.com for show notes, MP3s, our calendar, previous shows, and other fun stuff. If you have a comment on this episode, a question you'd like to hear us answer, a topic you'd like to hear us discuss, or you just want to say hi, you can leave a comment, or you can email us at ddocast@gmail.com. You can also find us on social media and follow us for the latest cast updates. At DDOcast on Twitter is the best place. So stick around for part 3 of Building a Tank. Well, welcome back to Building a Tank, our series on how to go about building a tank. It's been a while, but we're happy to be getting back into this finally. We have a new guest with us today, Epicsoul.
Hey, everybody.
Welcome. Epic is another one of my guildies, and who, well, why don't you just give us a quick idea of what you've been doing in the tanking world recently?
Yeah, sure. So for, as lots of Lava Divers have been pushing some challenge raids the past year, and I primarily have been filling the tanking role along with Benton. So just depending on the raid and what the guild needs, but primarily, yeah, for like KT and stuff, I've been tanking.
Great. So this should be fun. Unfortunately, just Benton's schedule. One of the reasons why this has been a long time in returning is Benton and I just weren't able to connect through all the various things of life right now. But Epic was kind enough to join us today. And so the previous 2 episodes, we talked a lot about the different stats and kind of things that you want to get. So if you're new to DDOcast, you may want to look back a bit to those episodes, which were 612 and 614, which gives you a little bit of an idea how long it's been since we've gotten back to this. We're going to kind of continue and build off of that, and we're going to do a little bit more kind of specifics about, start with some specifics about where you can do some building choices. And I think maybe just a place to start, let's talk about feats. Because there's a bunch of feats that you can kind of take, and some of them actually are not as useful as you might be led to believe. Um, so let's talk about. Maybe we'll start with the shield line, because there's a bunch of feats in the shield line that you can take, being shield mastery, improved shield mastery, uh, shield deflection, I think is what it's called,
Yep.
improved shield bash, those kind of things. So let's start there. What are your thoughts on some of those feats?
Well, depending on what you're trying to achieve with your tank build, whether that's if you're thinking about aggro management and actually hitting the boss and trying to hold aggro, it becomes a question of what you're trying to do. So for someone like myself who's thinking about in game Reaper tanking, it's about staying alive. So it becomes a question of math at that point, right? So you got the shield mastery feats that add some PRR and some melee power and some double strike, right? So the only thing you'd be interested there for myself would be the PRR. And it becomes a question of math. So most of the time that PRR does not, the benefits of that does not outweigh the benefits of just taking another toughness feat, which we will get into in a minute. But that said, if you're interested in trying to hold aggro on maybe some legendary hard or maybe even R1 raids, aggro management becomes an issue. So those feats might be more important in situations like that.
One of the things about PRR that I think is a little hard to wrap your head around is how much does 1 point of PRR actually benefit you? And the more PRR you get, the less another point will be of benefit. So I think, if I remember correctly, if you go from 0 to 1 PRR, you get a benefit of like 0.65% damage reduction. But if you're going from 400 to 401, it's like 0.005.
Yeah. So the formula for that's on, you can find that on DDO wiki or something like that. But right, when you get around 400, the benefits of 5 or even 10, 15 PRR is just not the same as 100 hit points.
Right. And we should mention shield deflection does not work super well with other things that also happen with blocking and energy resistance. At least that's my current understanding.
Yeah, I normally skip taking that feat. I've not done a whole lot of testing to determine how much it actually benefits, but I normally don't take it myself.
It looks super nice because it's like, hey, take 40% chance if you're using a tower shield. It's like 40% chance to not take elemental damage. Like,
Yeah, sounds great.
sounds great. In practice, it doesn't always work. That I do know. I did ask the devs. This was, I think, back when Killing Time just came out. I actually asked the devs specifically, hey, this feat doesn't seem to be applying to this, and I was told that was actually intentional against the dragon breath, which was a little disappointing.
That's correct, and it does work in certain places. Like if you're in VOD and the electric circles show up on the floor, sometimes it will trigger and you won't take any elemental damage. But yeah, against the dragon and KT, it's not gonna be much good.
Right. And then of course, I think we both agree that if you're really going to be building a tank for kind of a higher end of gameplay, you really need to focus on the defense. And so improved shield bash, not so helpful.
I don't think I've ever taken that feat on one of my tanks, but
Yeah.
there again, if you're doing lower difficulty, and I mean aggro management becomes
Different.
really it's a lot different when people are not their DPS isn't inhibited by the Reaper debuffs. So you're going to want to be doing some DPS yourself because the Tim is not enough to hold aggro.
Right. In practice, for me right now, my tank has just the base shield mastery, but not improved shield mastery, and neither of the other two feats. And then the reason why I did that is there's a line or a couple of Destiny choices in the Unyielding Sentinel tree that require the shield mastery. It means I don't get the tier 3, but between the feat and the first 2 tiers, I think I get like 15 PRR or something like that. 15, 20 PRR.
Yeah, I do the exact same thing.
So that's kind of a way to get through that. I guess we should mention natural fighting if you're doing a bear tank. My poor man bear tank does take those for the PRR and MRR and the other benefits. The natural fighting has a little bit of benefit in that it kind of throws a whole bunch of stuff into it, which can be really useful if you're doing a bear tank because
Yeah.
you can use all of it, right? Like it's fantastic.
Bear tanks is one type of tank I've yet to play. Benton was playing that the first time when I joined the guild, and it was a good build for aggro, for maintaining aggro, and there's a lot of fun things that the bears offered that your traditional tank doesn't provide.
Yes, I do know that Benton actually does not tend to take those line of feats, which has more to do with again being at kind of a higher level and leaning more into hit points. So he ends up taking toughness feats, which, and we'll kind of dovetail into that now. Toughness, when you start looking at toughness and other feats you're going to possibly take, toughness says it's going to give you 30 hit points. One for or a couple hit points at the first level and 1 point every level after. When you start looking at the math of you get this % bonus to hit points and this % bonus to hit points and this % bonus to hit points, toughness at level 30 ends up being around 100 hit points.
Yeah, that's right, and that's why it makes it such an attractive option for a tank, because we already hit on this, but you're talking about math. So if your goal is to be able to survive, so for instance, let's say we're going into R10 KT and we know the dragon hits for around 3,500, 4,000. You've got a threshold that you're trying to meet. So if investing in another shield mastery feat nets you 5 PRR and another 5 maybe from the Epic Destiny, that 10 PRR is not going to do as much good as another hit points. So unfortunately for a tank, it does look like there's a lot of options out there for you to increase your defenses and in the feat selections. But honestly, at the end of the day, most of the time the math makes more sense just to take another toughness feat.
And your mileage on this can kind of tend to vary, right? There's a big difference between R10 KT and R1 KT in terms of, 1, how hard things hit, but 2, how often you're going to get hit, right? So one of the things that we found, particularly, I think Lord of Blades was kind of the breaking point in this when we were pushing that. What ends up happening is, at a certain point, the boss has enough hit that your very impressive 500 AC doesn't, like, he still hits it almost every time. And it's just not providing the defense that you need. So if your defense is all those very lovely and beautiful numbers that say you can't hit me hardly ever, when that becomes you get hit all the time still, then it's kind of worthless and you have to really lean into hit points.
Yeah, that's right. So Benton and I have had this conversation before. Benton is a huge fan of AC. He likes those high AC numbers, and they matter in situational, in certain situations, which we'll get into a little bit later. But yeah, you're right. LOB and High Reaper KT, that AC means very little, and those bosses are hitting you almost 100% of the time. And when that's happening, it's not how high can my AC be? It's, can I take a couple of hits before I'm dead? And that is like a math question. How high can you get your HP? And currently I'm running a Barbarian, which was we built for KT, and it can get 10,000 hit points in Reaper, but it's running around with a little over 200 AC maybe. but it doesn't matter in KT at that high of a skull.
I should mention though that at least our experience with that is that's kind of a reaction to raids at R10, like these newer raids R10. Maybe talk a little bit about your experience of the AC versus hit points tanking in just normal everyday R10 questing.
You would want, so for instance, taking that same barbarian build that worked really well for KT into R10 quests or legendary hard raids or R1 raids, whatever. It's workable. I mean, it's going to get the job done, obviously, but you're going to get hit a lot more often. So I don't enjoy running that barbarian tank in R10 quests because I'm used to grouping up a bunch of mobs and sitting there while they miss me most of the time. That's not happening on the barbarian. You're taking a lot. You got a lot of hit points, but you're taking a lot of damage, and you require heals to be able to take that damage. So it's great for some things, and then other things the AC is preferred.
We should mention too that one of the features of that barbarian tank build is a high healing amp. So the survive strategy with that tank is lots of hit points, some really nice healing amp, get lots of heals.
Yeah, I think I'm running around with 420 heal amp,
yeah.
Whereas like my paladin build maybe hits around 280, 300.
Yeah, I think mine's in the somewhere between 240, 280. If I was smart, I would have wrote some of these numbers down. But
yeah, I didn't write them down either. But we're in the ballpark.
Yeah, don't focus too much on the numbers. Take the ideas, not the numbers, right? Okay, so other things to talk about with feats. This is an area that I kind of spent a lot of time really thinking about and kind of going back and forth on. Is when you get into the epic level feats stuff, obviously you're going to want to take epic toughness because that's 50 hit points, which comes out to something like 150, being worth 150 hit points. I do not take the bulwark of defense, I think is the name of it.
Yes.
Which is, it's very clearly geared towards a tank, but it's like 4 AC and +2 to saves.
Yes, it's something like that. The AC is correct. I'm not quite sure what the saves are. I used to take that for our rethinking the AC debate, but yeah, I haven't taken that in quite a while.
Even with there's a lot of % boost to AC out there that are available, but 4 AC just doesn't seem to translate very well, especially again when you consider I could take toughness and get 100 hit points instead. Like it just seems to, because AC is like PRR is a diminishing return value. Hit points are not. Every hit point you get is worth the same amount of benefit as the one before it.
Yeah, that's right. And don't get me wrong, I would love to have some more flexibility with tank options. I'd like for AC to matter as much as HP because whether you're talking about gear or like we're talking about feats right now, it gets boring just focusing on one stat instead of AC and PRR and MRR matter, of course, but it would be great if there were more options in feats that made sense to not take 5 toughnesses or 6 toughnesses. So maybe that's something that'll change in the future.
Yeah, I think I've been saying on the show for a while, or maybe just outside the show, that the bulwark of defense really needs a look-see at it, right? Maybe instead of just a flat +4 AC, if it was just, hey, here's +10% AC, then it becomes very attractive.
Yes.
Just to give a quick idea for Epic and with the Destiny feats, my current feat line of choice is Epic Toughness, the Epic Damage Reduction, which is 10 PRR. I take, for the Destiny feats, I take 1 toughness at the first spot, elusive something or other, that's a 5% mischance, and then deific warding which is some PRR and MRR plus some stacking PRR and MRRs. You get hit, which as a tank I get hit a lot. And then I take the Scion I take is the one that's hit points and some other healing stuff.
Yeah, I think it's the Celestial Scion.
That sounds right.
I like that variety, PJ. I take pretty much all toughnesses except for Deific Warding, so that's nice.
Well, I figured like 5% not get hit is helpful.
Yeah, that'll be good. And what other one did you mention that you take?
No,
maybe you just mentioned the 10 PRR and
yeah,
MRR. Yeah, I did the math. I think we did the math on that a while ago. If you're like over a certain threshold, again, it doesn't make sense to take that. It makes sense to take another toughness, again, which I hate, but this is the game we play.
I do also take the feat that makes it so you don't fail a save on a 1 for a reflex save. I did not build this tank like with R10 level in mind. I kind of built him more for raiding. I'm kind of more of a middle of the road.
Yeah,
so
a more universally useful build.
So I like the no fail on a reflex save for a 1, just because it helps lower some of the spike damage down.
Yep. I take that depending on the raid that we're running, and it's also worth noting that so you can get a no-fail Fortitude save and a no-fail will save from tier 1 twists. You can't do that from reflex, so that's it's good to take that from a feat if you want it.
Well, let's jump into some twists because we want to talk about that. Some twists that you may find to be really helpful. One is Draconic has the no fail on a 1 for a fort save. I think Monk actually might have all 3. The Grandmaster of Flowers,
but they're
higher.
Yeah, they're higher. Also in Draconic is in addition to the fort saves and the immunity or no fail fort saves rather, is the Draconic presence for +6 and 10, which used to I didn't really take, but now when you're running around in Mortal Blades where the intim check is a 153 or whatever, that can be a handy twist as well for tier 1.
Yep, that's a really great tier 1 twist. Meld into Darkness is obviously a really helpful one. 95% dodge for 15 seconds. I can remember. 15 or 20? I think it's 15.
Yes. to both.
One of those two. Doesn't matter. Whatever long it is,
it's useful. Take it.
Yes. So those are really helpful ones. Then you get into some kind of interesting. I mean, we're going to assume that you're in Unyielding Sentinel as a tank, because if you're not, you're not focusing on tanking as much as you may need to if you really want to be tanking. What are some other things you like to twist?
I already mentioned the no-fail will save. That's out of Magister. I think it's called Impregnable Mind or Impregnable Will or something like that. A Sheath is situationally useful. Depending on the raid and the difficulty you're running, you might want to twist the Sheath. And also, if you don't have someone, casting Martial Hymn on you, that's a tier 4 from Fate Singer. That's a good option as well.
Yep. So there's a couple of great places you can look for that.
And just a side note, if AC is something that you're wanting to boost, I think there's a couple that you can look at. There's one out of Monk, the Monk Tree Grandmaster Flowers, that has some AC options. And I think Shadow Dancer Tier 2 has an AC boost as well.
It does, but I believe it's... I can't remember off the top of my head. There's an AC boost, a max dex bonus, and I can't ever remember which of those is specific to light armor.
It is The dex bonus, the dex bonus is specific to light armor, but I'm not quite sure if the AC is. I know Benton used to take that a lot, so I would assume that that has been
Yeah, I think the AC bonus
tested.
works.
Yeah.
Another tier 2 you can take is improved combat expertise. We didn't mention combat expertise when we were talking about feats.
That's a good one, though. Yeah.
10% bonus to AC. Very nice. And then improved combat expertise gives you another, I think, 20 PRR.
That's right. Yeah, I used to take that quite a bit, and if I were on a paladin, I probably still would.
On a paladin, taking it.
Yep.
Yeah. When you're kind of dumping your AC on a barbarian tank, less useful.
Yes, it's hit points all the way.
Also, you can't use it while you're raging. So
that is also true. So, fun side note: I had not played a barbarian for quite a while before I did this tank, and there were so many things I was relearning rather, that I could not do because of rage.
Yep. All right, I think that kind of covers feats, twisting. There are other options. Feel free to leave a comment and throw out your own choices in there. And there's some kind of maybe some other considerations when we'll talk about kind of little like more specialty builds here in a minute. The other thing that we thought we should talk about is past lives. Maybe you're looking to build a tank and you want to, should we say, be a little bit more selective about what past lives you're going to get. Maybe you don't want to take the go get 60 past lives journey to get all of them. So what are maybe a couple or one things to consider when you're looking at past lives? Which ones do you recommend?
So first of all, before I started tanking, and I would talk to people who had been tanking or had tank builds, what past lives do I need? Almost always the answer was all of them.
Yeah.
I hate that answer, even though I do have all of them now. They're all useful. That is true. But do not think that you have to have all the past lives to be able to tank. That said, if I was just starting out and I had to pick a couple, the epic past lives are all good. The divine past life that gives the 30% absorption for elemental damage, I don't know the name of it off the top of my head, but that is definitely one that I would aim for on the early side of things.
Yeah, the epic past lives are all really helpful. The ones in the primal tree give you hit points. The ones in the divine sphere give you PRR. The arcanes give you energy absorption, and martial gives you AC. All really great things.
Yeah, all of those are good. And in terms of heroic or racial past lives, of course, the Constitution past lives from the racial, so dwarf and warforged, are nice. And then the heroic ones, off the top of my head, I guess you've got fighter that gives you an extra in 10, I believe, and barbarians more hit points. So there's
and in 10.
Barbarian gives you in 10 as well.
The past life that you take is plus 20 hit points and plus 2 intimidate.
Okay, well there you go. So there's some useful ones for heroic as well.
And paladin, the passive paladin gives you healing amp, which of course is really nice.
Right. Yeah, so broadly, when it comes to epic past lives, you can't really go wrong. They're all really good for tank, but the active ones, we named a few. But like I said, don't feel like you have to have all of the AC or all of the PRR past lives in order to be able to tank, because it's not necessarily true.
Yeah, I would say the investment into a tank, I think, is like if you want to be a really high end tier tank, the only thing that's going to be more investment than building a tank, in my mind, is DC casting. Because DC casting is really all or nothing. If it's a pass or fail mechanic.
Right.
Tanking, you don't need to hit that really high watermark. But if you do hit that really high watermark, it's very nice, and you get a lot more bang for your buck than most other kind of DPS builds or healers.
Yeah. And so you're talking about high end, and by definition, are you talking about our 10 quests, or are you talking about mid skull raids, or
Um,
what do you mean by high end?
I'm talking about just the tank itself.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
not specific to a quest or something, but if you're just looking at this tank versus that tank, this one has 5,000 hit points outside of it just sitting in town, and that one over there has 3,000 hit points. There's a lot of investment into the one that has 5,000 hit points.
Yeah, and you know, you might say that that's not really useful up to a certain point, and for most things, it's overkill for a lot of things.
Yep.
But if you're running those mid skull raids and the boss is hitting you, like I said, for 3,000-4,000, you want to be able to take a couple hits, and that's where all of these past lives really do come into play.
Yeah, all that to say that if you have a couple of characters that you're just thinking about, I want to take one on a really nice TR grind, which one is going to get the most bang for my buck? Probably your tank or your DC caster. So.
And I would agree with you there.
And if it's going to be, I'm going to do 10 or 15 lives, do the tank, not the DC caster. DC caster is kind of all or nothing.
Yeah. It is, unfortunately, especially in the newer content where mobs have very high saves. You really need everything that you can get.
Okay, let's transition a little bit into. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about kind of some specific tanking builds and kind of their special characteristics and why they get pulled out, why they got developed. Not like really initially specifically, but kind of some challenges that they, at least for us, we kind of created them to kind of come out. And so the ones I kind of want to touch on are Blade Forged or constructs. Less specifically, but kind of specifically Blade Forged, zombie tanks, bear tanks. I think are kind of the three that stand out a little bit. We kind of talked already about barbarian, like why the barbarian tank kind of came out and why we really like that one.
Yeah,
there's some combination tank builds that like pure fighter, pure paladin, some combination of paladin, barbarian, or not barbarian, paladin, fighter, artificer. And those are all kind of based around this idea of AC.
And those have kind of like I've not seen so many of those, and since the tank revamp a few updates ago.
There's still a 1244 paladin fighter artificer is still sort of popular, and I think it's kind of one of the places that you can get more AC than just about any other class split. You do lose some other things, particularly around hit points being a notable thing. But let's say that these are not all like these are the only builds that you can do in terms of tanking. I know there's some experimentation with a cleric-based tank in our guild. It had some nice features to it. There's a lot of kind of personal feel to some of this. I personally really like that my tank is a paladin because when I originally built the character, it was my paladin character. So it feels really nice that I can be a really good tank as a pure paladin again. There was a long period of time where that wasn't true.
And on the cleric, actually, the cleric tank, I don't remember my exact split, but that was my first build for tanking, and that's before I actually transferred to Kyber. But the comment I want to make on that is if you're a person that runs a lot of pug raids and you're always waiting on the tank, you're always waiting on a healer, that was a really good build to be able to tank and even self-heal for the most part, maybe up to R1 or R2.
Mm-hmm.
So that is something that while I was on Orion, we did a lot of pug raids, and it worked out really well for the purpose that I intended it for.
I plan on covering this build a lot more when we do building a healer, but I have a 17 favorite soul 3 paladin. Some people do it as fighter, which I wish I was a fighter and not paladin. for reasons, but that's another build that I really like because it does really well as a low investment build, and it's it doesn't really matter. Does the group need a tank? Does the group need a healer? I can do either one of those things. And those are two roles that are very commonly sought after when you get into raiding of any kind, particularly pug raiding. But in any case, did you have something you want to say?
No, I was agreeing with you that it's a versatile build and it's useful if you're running a lot of raids.
I wanted to talk specifically about a couple of tank builds that are the ones that we just kind of threw out a bunch of class splits and stuff there. They're very similar, right? It doesn't really matter which of those it is. Your gearing is going to be very similar. Your build choices are going to be very similar. The builds that I want to talk about, like constructs, undead, bear tanks, they have a very different building to them. They have things that are about them that are unique to them, that are not shared. Like all those other builds that we were talking about with fighter, paladin, artificer splitting, like that's all just build choices. You're pretty much just gift wrapping a different set of gear, right?
Right.
These ones are going to be there's some special considerations. So let's start with Blade Forged, and the reason why that one is kind of attractive is Blade Forged have a special ability that is a negative 10% slashing damage, which may not sound. It sounds like 10%, right? But when, say, Lord of Blades is hitting you for 2,000 to 4,000 slashing damage a hit, that translates a lot.
Yes, it does. And there again, that becomes a conversation of like, do the benefits outweigh the negatives? So Blade Forged is something that we've used, or more specifically, Benton has used for Lord of Blades. At that high end, because you're taking so much damage, 10% off of 4,500 at like R6, R7. That's 450 hit points that you get to save right there. But there again, the healing becomes a factor, and I know that you have a comment to add on that and how we dealt with that. So I'll let you talk about that.
Friends with we call it the friends of benefits. Yeah, you can use. We'll come back to that and
Okay.
and touch on that. But
Fair enough.
What we're getting at here is Blade Forge have all Warforged have a penalty to healing amplification, and that's to your base healing amplification. Blade Forge have another 10%, I think, on top of that.
I do.
And there is a healer's friend enhancement. If you're going to be a Warforged tank, if you hear nothing else, take that.
Yes, I could. PJ and I both play healers, so listen to that good advice.
Hey, if you're playing a Warforged, who cares if it's a tank or not, take the healing friend. There's also, but you can reduce that a little bit. But I think for a normal Warforged, you're still looking at like minus 10% to your base healing. And I believe Blade Forge is at minus 20.
Yes, and let's make sure to point out that PJ is not saying negative 20 healing amp. He's saying base healing. So that's whatever healing you're taking, you can touch 10% or 20% off that, depending whether you're Warforged or Blade Forged.
Then you get the healing amp.
And then you get the healing. Yes, but it makes a big difference. Yeah.
Especially when you're if you think about the way that the healing kind of works in the game today, especially when you start looking at what a lot is happening in raids at level 30 and legendary raids, some of the very most common ways of getting healing are renewal and the healing wall from Favorite Soul. Two things that my Favorite Soul healer uses a ton. And those do a lot of healing, but they do it in increments. And every single one of those increments on a Blade Forge is getting reduced. So that healing penalty is actually coming up very, very frequently compared to, if I just throw a heal at you, then it's probably a wash. Although maybe not, depending on how many hit points you have and how much positive healing amp I have. But those big heals are not generally the default healing that you're going to receive. Renewal and closed wounds have very short cooldowns, so they get used a lot as healers.
Right. Renewal is something that I've used, and I know most healers have used that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're talking about, let's use Lord of Blades again for an example, you're in there on a barbarian tank taking 45, 100 points of damage each hit. That's, it's a lot of damage, but you got 10,000 hit points, and each tick of I think on Benton's tank, my renewal hits him for around 55, 6,000,
it's a lot.
ticks. Yeah, it's a lot. So it's really useful to use that or close wounds. But you compare that to his blade forged without any help from a friend, and it becomes a lot more difficult, and you're not just relying on renewal. And I hardly use closed wounds on the blade forged tank because you're having to constantly spam heal or cure, mass cures or whatever.
It's not enough.
It's not enough, no.
And part of the reason why that, and this there's a kind of a hidden penalty in healing when it comes to gearing, because the docents from Sharn, which are kind of I think most high-end tanks are still using the Sharn set and not the Winter set because of Legendary Greenstone. We'll get into more of that when we talk about gearing. But the Sharn tank armors, the docent has repair amplification. The armors have healing amplification. So you get hit there as well.
Yes.
And I think that's not something that's one of those things that it's kind of hidden behind the math that you don't necessarily think about.
And I can't quite remember how Benton got healing up into his build, but even with it was still a problem. Right. But yes, that's another consideration. But that said, Blade Forged and Warforged do have the ability to be repaired, which is not something that is widely used in the game outside of, or at least in the raiding scene, I should say. And that could have a few uses, like in Vision of Destruction. The curse prevents you from being healed, but you can actually still repair a tank even with the curse.
Yep. Let's jump into undead tanks, which will probably have less to say. Again, like the biggest drawback here is a massive penalty to healing, which healing salve, talk more about in Friends of Benefits, is something you can get around that. But it does have some advantages. This was really popular for pushing Baba's Hut. Because the undead tank is immune to Horde Wilting. I think it's also immune to Burning Blood and a couple other things.
It is, yes. And the thing with the undead tank is up until, I think, a couple patches ago, maybe it was last patch, Renewal didn't work on an undead tank at all.
Well,
it does now.
It does now. The Renewal works on undead showed up probably 4 or 5 times over the last 2 years in the release notes, and it never took until recently. So,
which made it really difficult to remember this person cannot cast Renewal.
I didn't ever remember. It was just in my thing, and I'd throw it out there. And I remember when we were pushing KT at one point, and I was in there on a healer, and it's just. You're throwing heals everywhere. It's just click heal, click heal, click. You're not even paying attention.
Exactly.
And then you realize that you have to go back and heal someone because the renewal's not working because they're undead.
Yeah. So while healing amp is an issue for undead, at least that is fixed, and you can now cast renewal on all your undead friends.
But in any case, undead tanking, I think if you've got a really good tank, I think. Shanae has been running around with an undead tank a lot. Which it can work great. Just understand that if you're going to be taking a lot of damage, if your defenses aren't going to keep up with the damage your healing amp will really penalize you. Now, having said that, they at least can wear armor that has healing application on it, so that
That's true.
helps.
And if your goal is to tank pug raids there, or I say pug raids, if your goal is to tank R1 and below raids, the wizard setup for the most part has access to a lot of negative healing amplification, and I mean a lot. So it is, I don't want to say easy, but it is relatively easy to uh, build a self-sustaining tank, an undead tank, because you can heal yourself with the auras, which are really nice, because you can get a couple of those, maybe even 3 of those, depending on how you build it. And it's quite self-sustaining tank for Reaper R1 raids and lower.
Yep. And then the other one is bear tanking, and the thing that's really your feat line is different. None of the shield mastery feats work. I think they all say it does not work in animal form conveniently. But so you're going to be losing those lines. You have the natural fighting feat line instead. Kind of the big difference here is you get to use rage. That's a big feature of them. So you incorporate raging. Why you see a lot of splits with barbarian with druid to do a bear tank, because you can pull in, you can layer those raging bonuses on top of each other. Works really nice. I find it's a lot of fun. It's a bit more of an offensive tank than the other ones. Just it naturally has kind of some offensive capabilities that you're going to get built in. But you have to be aware of things like we mentioned before. You can't use combat expertise. You can't use, the only defensive stance you can use is the bear one, which is fine. Like the other ones, you don't need the other ones. Well, I guess you can use epic defensive fighting, but you don't need to.
Bear also has access to Maul, which is pretty much a second Tim if you use it's an attack that from the, is it a spell or from the tree?
It's a spell.
Okay.
You get an upgraded one you get Greater Maul from the tree, but it's still a spell.
Okay. Well, it's a second Tim, which is useful.
They also get more hit points out of their stance, although they have a little bit more of a requirement than the other defensive stances do. But there you go. I guess we maybe should mention the one thing that's a little bit different about the barbarian tank that you guys have been running of late, because it's a pure barbarian. It doesn't have a defensive stance. It's one of the reasons why its defenses are considerably lower. But you can use epic defensive fighting to get the hit point boost, which of course impacts your feat choices because you need to take 4 feats that apply to that.
Right. And after talking about all of these builds, be it really specific to certain situations like the undead tank or whatever, if you're listening to this hoping to hear PJ or Epic say this is the best tank build and you can use it for all situations, there's not one. Each one of them has their strengths and weaknesses, and it's specific to the situation.
I mean, having said that, if you're looking for a utilitarian across the board, going to be a great tank, pure paladin works great.
I agree, and that's my favorite tank.
Yeah, I love it. If you want to have a little bit more investment and maybe flexibility, I would also recommend a 12-4-4 paladin fighter artificer. Although I will warn you, it's really easy to get lost in the choices that you can make in that build.
Yeah. And I would also recommend if you're looking for a utilitarian build that you can use for most things, don't forget to invest in some type of hate aggro management, because as we said earlier, Intim will not be enough to hold aggro for R1 and below raids.
It's true. All right. We're going to end the discussion for now. We'll be back to continue our discussion. So thanks, Epic, for joining me. Anything you want to plug, sir? I should ask you before.
Nothing to plug, no.
Well, I'll give a little plug. If you want to see some of what we're talking about, because we're pulling a lot of specifics about what our guild has been doing of late in terms of pushing raids, you can see some of those videos on the forums. We do generally in the achievements post a video with those, so people can see what we're doing and kind of some of the strategies. You won't necessarily get a lot of like the build specific details, unless someone happens to throw up their character sheet, and it's a tank, but it's not usually a tank that's actually filming anyways.
No.
But you can see some of these builds and kind of see how they're being used and kind of that sort of thing. So.
Yep, that's true. And if anyone wants to PM me on the forums, I'm happy to answer any tank questions as well.
Yeah. So thanks for joining me today. If you'd like to support the show, you can visit our website, DDOCast.com, or you can support us on Patreon. You can also find show notes, past shows, and more on our website, DDOCast.com. And you can find me on Twitter, @DDOCast is the best place for social media. If you'd like to join the discussion, you can leave a comment or email us, ddocast@gmail.com. So until next time, may all your attack rolls be crits, all your chest level appropriate, have fun, and don't forget to gather for buffs.